Welcome back to Talking Story. My name is John Minton, and I can't put this off anymore. I'm running out of year. So if I'm going to get a best top 10 list of my favorite fantasy series out in 2023, it has to be now. I have tried to cram as much reading in since joining BookTube so I can get the list as current as I possibly can, but there's still so much on there that I wish I could have read. Maybe 2024, but we're going to go and put this on the books for 2023, and let's lay out some rules first of all. Number one, I'm not going to do two series by one author. In other words, I'm going to do one series per author because I want to get as many authors in there because I have so many authors that I truly love, and that was just something to give myself some guide rails of not doing it. In other words, I can't do, Mistborn and then Stormlight. I got to pick one or the other and make sure that author, Brandon Sanderson in this case, is represented. And will he be? I don't know. It's a mystery. So anyway, that's kind of the only rule. Other than that, I've got none. This is just strictly by how I feel when I read these things and when I started putting this list together and then put the list together again and then put the list together again because it took a couple tries. So first off, let's get to some honorable mentions because I'm a booktuber and I can't squeeze everything I love into 10. So I do have some honorable mentions because to not talk about these series would just be a complete lie to me. And number one on my honorable mention, I'm going to say Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson because of the rule I gave myself to try and squeeze a top 10 together of not having two by the same author. I had to leave this one off the list, but I have to give it an honorable mention. This is where I found Brandon Sanderson really found himself as a plotter. Everything had the breadcrumbs that he was building as he was constructing this trilogy. They all had the breadcrumbs of where it was going, so they were always earned. But at the same time, I did not see them coming because they were so bold to me as far as his choices went as an author. But when you look back over it, and it's like, oh my, he's been leading up to that all along. I just thought he really spread his wings as a plotter in this trilogy, and I absolutely loved it, as well as some of the characters. Sazed will continue to be my guy. I just had the most fun with this trilogy as I'm doing my Cosmere catch-up for the year, so I have to have it in my honorable mentions. Also, I've got to do Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. Now, this didn't make my top 10 list because I already have it on a top 10 list of great horror series, and I kind of consider Dresden Files more horror because a lot of the characters are werewolves and vampires. Now, I know there's a lot there to be urban fantasy as well, every pantheon you can imagine in the Fae and everything else, but in my mind, it just seemed like a more natural fit to me over on that list. So I had already had it on a list, so I kind of didn't feel as bad as not including it here, but I absolutely have to do an honorable mention. If you have not looked into this wonderful kind of noir detective look at the urban fantasy genre, it is so much fun. It is just a blast from the past in the writing style as far as that hard-boiled detective, first-person narration, and then just wild cases from everything that goes bump in the night. And it is a great deal of fun to go on this multi-book journey with Harry Dresden and start to realize who he is, not only from what he does and says, but from how the characters around him grow and see him grow. And it is such a great series for that. Also, now this was just on the list and off the list and on the list and off the list so many times because I read it this year and absolutely loved it, but it ended up being off the list and it broke my heart. So I have to put it out there in an audible mention, and that is Daughter of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wirtz. I was a huge Rift War fan when I was young and the books were first coming out. So when there was a buddy read after I joined BookTube for the Daughter of the Empire trilogy, which is the second trilogy in the Rift War saga, and Raymond E. Feist, and adding Janny Wirtz to it, I jumped on board that read along, and man, was I just so happy I did. It was everything I remember it being. Janny Wirtz adds, I think, that little extra magic to it And it's just such a great look at what is on the other side of the Rift War, through the Rift into that other world. Asian influenced fantasy, some of the best political fantasy I have read in a long, long, long time. And I love the way the 3 books are structured, each book being a different phase in this one woman's life who ends up being enormously important to her culture and world as she comes into contact with people from her world and the world on the other side of the rift, and realizing that everyone is not only should be empathetic to others, but also we are stronger for meeting and bringing others into our sphere of life. And it was just kind of like an East meets West kind of thing. Then we were stronger together, and I absolutely love the themes of it. Book 3 lost just a hair for me on some character motivation aspects, and that's why I finally had to take it off the list. But I had to add it in my honorable mentions. Now I have 2 more in my honorable. Nope, I have 1 more in my honorable mention. Now this, I know I might get some comments here. I have to do an honorable mention of Wheel of Time. I'm 6 books in, and it was on the list and off the list and on the list and then off the list. I'm just struggling with some pace issues with it. I do love it for so many things. I love it for the multiple chosen one character journeys of all these characters that I'm absolutely loving, going along their journey with them. I'm loving it for the intense world building as far as history. And I'm loving it for the circular type of story of what has happened will happen again. I absolutely love that theme. There's so much I love about it. I have some pace issues with it. And some other little nitpicky things about your repetition is an issue for me. So I ended up having to take it off the list. But as I go further on in the series, like I say, I'm only at book 6. And from everything that everyone tells me, some of the true magic starts happening later in the series. So this could absolutely very well make the top 10 list going in the future. But for me right now, it is on the honorable mention list. And that brings me with my 2 left here, and that is Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I have to have that. It's what got me into reading fantasy. I think it was so, I identify with it on my reader's journey from all the way back as a very, very young person. And just for the nostalgia factor and what it meant to me as a person growing up, I have to have it on the list. And also in that same token, I got to go Harry Potter with J.K. Rowling. She just hits so many of the tropes all the way back, started by Dickens and before, so well, so much fun. And it's that perfect lightning in a bottle of a series, that alchemy. I've had several people say I've fallen out of reading. I just don't know anymore. And I've given them the Harry Potter series when they're very low in their lives. And it's like, I just can't even focus right now on reading. I have things going on, and I give that to them, and it pulls them back into reading, because it is just pure delight and pure candy. So I have to have it in my honorable mentions. But enough honorable mentions. Let's actually get to it. Coming in at number 10, I'm going with the Last War series by Mike Shackle. I have read the first 2 of these. I have the 3rd left to read, but I am so confident that he is going to nail this ending. I am putting it on the list. It squeaks in at number 10 for me. I am blown away by this Asian-influenced military grimdark fantasy trilogy. It is about an invasion. It is about an occupation and the subsequent uprising after that occupation. It is brutal. He understands that writer's rule of killing your darlings. He puts his darlings through the meat grinder like I haven't seen in a long, long time. And the other thing I love about this, even though it is a very military type fantasy, some of these characters that are going to be called to heroism in this uprising at this time in the history of this book, in this series, are not military characters. They're just regular people in this occupation that have to answer the call and grow to be heroes for their own safety and for their family's safety and for what is true and good to their own conscience. It is absolutely a great grimdark read. If you like that style, if you like the military style, if you like Asian influence style, I think you'll absolutely find a lot here to love. The characters will get under your skin. You will absolutely root for them, and you will absolutely revile the villains. He does a great job of creating a villain on paper that you love to hate. Coming in at number 9, I'm going The Gentleman Bastards by Scott Lynch. I adore this series. I understand we're all waiting for the next book, but for me, I'm not going to hold that against this author. I understand he works slow. I understand we're all waiting, but at the same time, I so adore the time that I have spent with the books that are out. Locke and his group, this is the most perfect amalgamation of like a heist. It's like Ocean's 11 meets Lord of the Rings. There's amazing world building. There is amazing nonlinear storytelling in its structure that we don't always see. There is amazing characters that you will absolutely just keep you turning pages way later into the night than you should to see what happens to them. And book after book, I do think the first book is the strongest, but the second and third are just as fun. They are an amazing romp, and he takes them to different locales as he expands this world and brings in different characters from their past. And it's that little breath of Dickens that I love in it, as far as starting as an orphan, having that Fagin-like character teach him the ways of crime. It just was so lovely to see that reflected in a fantasy. I just had the most fun with this, and I hope he gets us the next book quickly. Number 8, this is one I read this year as I tried to catch up here on BookTube. I am going to go the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I had the most fun with this. I am a huge sucker for all things Arthurian, and I thought the little shades he had of some of T.H. White's Once and Future King moments, not only from the book, but from Arthurian movies that we have seen. He just had such wonderful Easter eggs and callbacks to not only that, but Lord of the Rings. When he set about his quest to create an epic fantasy adhering to his own rules, he started with these things, these building blocks that we know and we love, and he had no problem going further than that and then subverting those tropes by giving us something that we never saw coming. And I'm talking about the end of that book too. What? Not that I'm going to spoil it, but he subverted our hopes and our dreams and the tropes that we understand from fantasy that we all love by making it his own. And he's absolutely the master of voice. Each character has their own distinct and oftentimes hilarious voice that keeps you turning pages because you just have to see what this person's going to say next. And the dramatic device of having the character Glotka having his inner monologue on the page so we can not only follow what he says, but follow what he's thinking. The character arcs in this are unbelievable. You start out thinking somebody is on this side of the ledger for you, and by the end of book 2, they're somewhere entirely different. The characters are gray, but they're gray because they're complex, not because they're not worthy. They do answer to their own moral code, and they are, in my opinion, heroes in their own way because they try to overcome the world they're living in, which is a very, very brutal world. Love this series. Cannot wait to continue into the standalones in 2024. Coming in at number 7. Okay, here's one that a lot of you are going to say, no, it's not a fantasy. But to me, it absolutely is. And I just wrapped up this trilogy and I have to put it on my list. I am talking about, at number 7, The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. This to me is absolutely a fantasy. It is absolutely a historical fiction as well. But as it starts retelling the Arthurian legend of how it really could have been at that time, through the eyes of historian, as it moves forward through the 3 books, you start to see these glimmers of, as Merlin the Last Druid is trying to hold on to what he sees as the goodness in this land, the old gods, if he can just make this what it once was, it becomes a battle between ideologies of the old gods and the new monotheistic ideal of Christianity as it sweeps across the country, and what a single man has to give up in his beliefs because it's the right thing for him to do at that moment, to go a different way in his ideology, to save someone important to him. At that one moment, an entire fulcrum of an ideology and belief system for a world that they use to define and order their reality hinges on one man and what he will do for the person he loves. And I thought it was just absolutely beautiful. I thought it was absolutely whimsical. I thought it was absolutely magical, because there is a magic system in play here, and it is the systems of faith that operate in our world that we see every day, and how much willpower and belief that we put into those ideals of faith, and how we structure our ideas of reality through them, the lens of right and wrong, and basically just the world we live in. And we completely do that, and it is magic. And for me, it did absolutely read like a fantasy, and I will go to the mat fighting for it. It comes in at number 7 for me. Coming in at number 6, get ready again, because you might say, oh my God, that's not a fantasy series, it's not a novel, and it's not, but it belongs on my list because it is some of the best fantasy I've ever read. I'm talking at number 6. I'm going to go with The Sandman by Neil Gaiman. Yes, this is a comic. It's a long-running comic, so it's absolutely a series, but this has the most amazing fantasy that you have ever read. If you have not read it, please, please start. Neil Gaiman understands mythology. He understands underneath us the myths and the legends that make us up, because we are walking retainers of story ourselves. So we are built up of story, and he understands this. He mines mythology, he mines legend, and he understands when he's mining those things that he understands. He builds a pantheon, a new pantheon, the family of the endless, that stands outside and above all the other pantheons that have gone before it. Norse, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, they're all there, but the family of the endless were there before, they are there after, and he understands the rule. Once you build a pantheon, what you do is you imbue them with human desires and frailties, and then by watching them deal with their family and their struggles, we can learn a little bit about ourselves. It is done just, I can't say enough about this series. It is a graphic novel. It is a series of comics, but it is some of the best work in fantasy I have read in my lifetime. I implore you, if you have not read it, to give it a try. Coming in at number 5, I have the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. What I find so interesting about this series is we have an author writing over such a long, protracted period of time that we have him at a different point in his artist journey each time a book comes out. The end was a little bit more compressed, but through up until that, we have Stephen King at different moments and in his life and through his artist journey putting out a new book in this series. And you can tell kind of where he's at in his life. You can almost track his artist journey by reading this series. And what a series it is. He takes iconography from the Western, from the epic fantasy, from horror. It is a love letter to all those and more. It is a love letter to every way of telling a story. It is a multiversal tale. Everything is up for grabs. Everything ever written, everything ever thought, everything ever is there. Does it get weird? Yes. Is there a psychotic train? Sure. And that's a little bit weird. There's some of it that makes you go, oh, all right, this is maybe where, there was some substances involved with our artist journey in Stephen King. But still, I love that it's out there. I love that he took bold swings and chances, and the epic journey of this hero of Roland Deschain, mirroring the Arthurian legend as well as Sergio Leone's Western. Somehow it just all comes together and works. It's lightning in a bottle. It's alchemy. it just speaks to me. I know some people, it goes off the beaten path for them. For me, I was on the journey the whole way with this quartet, and I absolutely loved my time with it. Coming in at number 4, and this is lower than most people, and there's a reason why. Number 4, I have the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. Why is it maybe a bit lower for me than others? And that is because I have only completely read The Way of Kings and was knocked off my chair. My hair was blown back. The philosophy of it, of a world that has moved on, is to the point where everyone is just seeing for the nihilistic purposes of themselves. Even the religion is there just to bolster up your personal destiny of what you need. How can this religion make you achieve that, as opposed to the service or chivalry or giving through a life of others around you. But now the old ideas are starting to come back because the old evil is once again reasserting itself. And how are we fight that? I just love the philosophy of it. I love the characters of it. Kaladin and Shallan and Dalinar. I just cannot wait to continue this journey. And I have started Book 2, Words of Radiance. It is my final read in 2023. The last 2 weeks of the year will be taken up with this book for me. And I have a distinct feeling after I finish even Book 2 that this is going to shoot further up the list for me. Coming in at number 3, we're at the top 3. I have the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. Yes, I know. He needs to finish. He needs to get us that 3rd book. But again, I do not begrudge him or begrudge myself the time I have spent with these first 2 books and the first novella. I have not read the 2nd novella yet. But I absolutely love the time I have spent in this world. I love the time I have spent with, quote, the main character, the main protagonist of this story. Come on, it speaks to me. He comes from a family of traveling performers and actors. Right there, you had me at the get-go. The prose in this is absolutely luscious. It is gorgeous. It is beautiful. It will make you put the book down time and again to consider the wordsmithing that he puts into it. But you can't put it down and stop because you're on a downhill slope of a roller coaster that you can't get off and can't stop because you have to see how these characters are going to make it. There's shades of so much great literature that went before that he brings into it, from the great Russian stuff to just classic after classic. They have a little shade in there that he uses it to color this epic fantasy. I absolutely adore this series. I hope that he completes it, and I will be there day 1 if he does. Number 2, this is a no-brainer for me, and this fought back and forth with number 1 time and time again, but number 2, I'm bringing in Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, because without this epic fantasy, without this most perfect hero's journey executed to perfection that I have probably ever read or watched, if I'm including movies, we would not have the genre that we all know and love. There has to be this as a template for us to move forward. Now, I know he was riffing off some of the great Iliad, Odyssey, Beowulf, things that came before him, but he put it through a lens of our own myths and legends of Europe that spoke to us, that we could relate to, that we could understand. And at the same time, he put it through a new lens and spoke to us on a hero's journey that we could all connect with. Frodo represents that hero in all of us, the everyman that could be called to do something above his way of life and station at any moment. And will we be ready? Will we be pure of heart enough to go on this epic quest and not be tainted and be able to complete it? Time and time again, he does the world building through art. The song and the epic poetry of this world that came before is intermingled and interwoven in, which gives it such a lived-in setting. It makes it feel so real. It's easy to get caught up in. It is easy to root for this hero, and it is easy to see yourself in this hero. And it is easy to base a genre moving forward and still moving forward to this day from this tale. And that is why, for me, it was 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, and it finally came in at 2. And why did it come in at 2? Because I feel like number 1 for me just took what Lord of the Rings was and amped it up on nitrous. I have to go number 1, A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. It took every tenet of epic fantasy that we know and love going all the way back and completely just put the spurs to it and amped it up. Made it so much more human, made it so much more visceral, made it so much more real, made the stakes so much... I mean, you can't have higher stakes in Lord of the Rings, but it made the stakes higher in that it interpersonalized and per character. Each character has such a distinctive Aristotelian arc playing out within these pages. Characters that you become enamored with as you think they are the hero. They will not be saved. Characters that you think will be the villain, you will soon, in a number of books, be rooting for. Why? You can't explain it, because they are human. They are three-dimensional. They have shades of white, black, and gray in the middle at their core. They will answer to their own conscience and their own moral compass, and they will answer to it in a shifting manner as their moral compass changes as their journey progresses through the book. That is such an enormously hard feat to do in literature. He pulls it off time and time and time again with the characters in this series. And that is what makes you keep coming back. And the way it just reads as concrete and solid and real. By the time we get dragons in this, we have become so enamored with the political machinations and the family drama that we see ourselves, we see our world in it, even though it is definitely removed. By the time he brings in magical elements, you're like, yeah, sure, I'll buy it. I'll stay on this journey with you, whether it's my cup of tea or not, because I've completely bought in at this point. It is a magic trick that absolutely marvels me. I can't think of anyone else that has pulled it off better. And that is why, for me, and again, I do not begrudge myself the time I have spent in this world, even though we're all waiting to go back. And for the sheer reason that we all are waiting to go back, and we will be in line day one to pick up that book, that is why it is my number 1 fantasy series at this time. I know this list is going to be different probably within the next 2 weeks when I finish reading Words of Radiance. But for me, right now, my first year on BookTube, I wanted to get my list up for 2023 so I can look back at it in 2024 and see how it has changed as I go along on this reading journey. If I have missed something, if there is something you cannot believe is not on my list, hit me up in the comments. If there's something you don't think should be on my list, hit me up in the comments. I love comments. I love to talk back and forth. It's the whole reason why I joined BookTube, and it is why I keep coming back. You have enriched my life so much sharing this reading journey with me. So hit me up again with comments right down there. That little thumbs up button. Click that. It helps us build a channel. And that subscribe button. If this is your first time here at Talking Story, or maybe you've checked us out a couple times before, hey, hit that button. It feels good. It feels good, and it helps us build a channel. And we want to see you back here time and time again, because I love taking this reading journey with you and talking with you. So thank you so much for your time that you've given me today. Thank you for hanging out for my list. If you've hung out for my list of where my top fantasy series are in 2023, that tells me that you are book people. And if you are book people in my book, that makes you the best people. Thank you so much again. My name is John Minton, and this has been Talking Story.